Mr. Zarif, are you on the phone?
I'm connected, I believe.
Yes, I'm so sorry. I was, as soon as the questions are over, I try to run away.
I know nobody likes success stories.
Exactly. Well, we're very excited to have you here by video conference, and congratulations on the mission success and on your successes. You have the floor, sir, and then we'll take some questions.
Well, thank you very much. The congratulations are owed to the people of Liberia, and I think they're the ones who should take the lion's share of the credit for such a success. I think with the inauguration of the new president, Liberians have really brought the long process of maturation of their democracy to its climax, and they can now proudly hold their heads high for all the effort and energy and resolve they have invested in this process. And it's a matter of pride also for the United Nations and other international parties, hands of the Liberians throughout these years. As you all know, Liberia emerged out of the scourge of its civil war in a very shattered manner. The economy was almost bankrupt. Institutions of the state were almost non-functioning, and the whole country was in a state of despair. And with the end of the Civil War and the advent of the new chapter in the life of the Liberians, a whole lot of work and effort started with the good visions provided by Ellen Johnson Sirleaf as President of Liberia. Working together with the international community, they managed to recreate some of the institutions of Liberia that were responsible for the delivery of service to the people. They also put back the economy on the right path, and they were boasting some 8% growth until the unfortunate phenomena of Ebola hit them in the face and caused a lot of casualties. And that was coupled by a steep decline in the price of the Liberia's traditional export commodities. And together with that came, of course, the very rapid drawdown of the United Nations, which used to infuse a whole lot of resources into the economy of Liberia. And coupled with a state of political uncertainty and instability that prevented further investments from abroad or remittances from the Liberians abroad, the country is still faced with a lot of fragility and uncertainty in the future. But the level of enthusiasm and expectation is extremely high. The president is trying to manage these expectations, highlighting his commitment to fight against corruption, to strengthen the judiciary, to adopt some important laws that would open a prospect for diversification of the economy and generation of wealth within Liberia. It's very important that he has started opening the space to all Liberians. He's trying to embrace whatever capacity that exists across the political spectrum of the country, enabling all energy, resources, talent, capacity, skills that are available in Liberia to be put at the service of the people. His poor focused political and economic agenda has given a lot of hope to the Liberians who have been hitherto denied the opportunity of participating in the political and economic space. At the same time that he's trying to manage expectations, he is fully aware of the fact that Liberia has to prove now to the international community that they own their own problems, and it is their responsibility to do something about it before they extend their hand for requesting assistance from foreign countries. I think the success of peacekeeping operations in Liberia brings to a close almost 3 decades of the United Nations involvement in peacekeeping operations in this region. With the success of the peacekeeping operations in Sierra Leone back in 2005 and the closure of peacekeeping operations in La Côte d'Ivoire in 2017. Liberia is also now coming to the last weeks of its own operations here, and this will complete our peacekeeping activities in the whole of West Africa. I think the whole of West Africa, particularly now Liberia, are on the right path in order to build on on their democratic gains and focus on strengthening a sense of national unity and reconciliation and forge their hands together for building a Liberia that's deserving of the Liberians and would be a fulfillment of the aspirations of Liberians ever since the creation of this country. This was a monumental achievement and accomplishment, and I think all Liberians share in the pride of this successful process, because in one way or the other they all contributed towards the peaceful, credible, transparent and participatory elections. Even those who complained about the outcomes of the first round of elections did contribute towards strengthening the experiment of democracy by going to the courts, to the due process, instead of sending their boys into the street. If you compare the recent elections of Liberia with the rest of Africa during the past few years, Liberia stands out as a very, very good example where there was absolutely no violence, and there were not even demonstrations after the announcement of the first round of elections results. This is a strong sense of commitment, not only by the Liberian political leaders, but by the people of Liberia, never to go back to the mistakes of their past. I think the government of Liberia, headed by Ellen Johnson Sirleaf at the time, also contributed tremendously by creating a very conducive, peaceful, free environment for the exercise of the right of the citizens and of all political parties to compete in a very fair and transparent manner for the hearts and minds of the people. It's a very happy day for everybody, particularly for the United Nations, where good news and success stories are hard to find. And we did this together and in solidarity with all the Liberians, including the civil society organizations who became very, very active in bringing out the Liberians to get themselves registered as voters and encouraging them to show up at the polling stations and exercise their franchise. We also did this together and in solidarity with the regional actors like ECOWAS and African Union, and with the EU, and with the participation of a large number of international observers who came from faraway locations in order to enhance the level of respect and transparency and trust in the elections. And that's why we can jointly celebrate with the people of Liberia this successful closure of the transition, paving the way for a new Liberia that would build upon their accomplishments and become more self-reliant and become a contributory towards international peacekeeping efforts in the future, rather than being a recipient of it. We are grateful also to all those countries who contributed police and military to this peacekeeping operation, whose presence and contributions were of tremendous impact on maintenance of stability and peace in the country and providing conducive environment for growth and for the strengthening of democracy. I think I should stop there and take questions.
Great. Thank you for those. Abdelhamid, go ahead. If you could identify yourself.
Thank you, Abdulhamid Sayam from Al-Quds Al-Arabi. I hope you still remember me from the days of Iraq. How are you?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
I'm very fine. Hope you're well.
Thank you so much. You have served in many conflict areas, Mr. Zarif. You've been in Iraq, you've been in Kosovo, and many others, and now in Liberia. This is a successful story. What lesson you can take it to other missions that is really finding some difficulties, like the Congo, like the case in Libya now, and Syria, as you know. So what a good lesson from your experience, you can transfer it to your colleagues in those troubled areas. Thank you.
Thank you, Abdelhamid. I think the most important thing I would like to say is that we must emphasize the primacy of political work, of good offices, of prevention, and of dialogue. Instead of heavily relying on our kinetic ability, on our uniformed personnel, we'll have to really make better and further use of our convening power and try to bring the parties together before a situation develops into a crisis, where then it will be more difficult to reverse it, to contain it, and to prevent and mitigate against a repetition of these scenarios. That would be my key takeaway from, not only from experience in Liberia, but 24 years of work with the political, peacekeeping, and humanitarian missions of the United Nations. The other thing is that when we deploy as peacekeeping operations or political missions, we have to ask that difficult question of why are we here in the first place, and why that country is there in the first place. Identifying the root causes of the conflict should be the first homework that we must do, and then put all of our attention, or the majority of our attention and resources towards tackling those root causes of the conflict, building the elements of stability within the society rather than just as a result of our deterrence presence in the country. That would be my second takeaway from all these years of experience. The third one would be to hold national authorities accountable towards their own obligations. Relations between the international community and national authorities should be on the basis of quid pro quo. There should be a foundation on which both would undertake obligations and responsibilities and would remain accountable to one another. A sort of framework of mutual accountability that would enable the international community, based on the strength of the mandate given by the Security Council and based on the influence and significance of the volume of assistance that they bring to the country, they should be in a position to talk very honestly, firmly, and candidly with the authorities to make sure that they know that it is their job to look after their people and after their nation. And only then the international community will come to aid them. Over to you.
Thank you. Matthew?
Thanks a lot. Matthew Lee, Inner City Press. I wanted to, thanks for what you said at the top. I wanted to know, in terms of understanding how today's UN is working, I know that Mr. Obasanjo was sent in as a sort of a, I guess when the election counting was going on. And I just wanted to know, since he's also been sent to Kenya, but it wasn't announced, how was this, did this coordinate with the mission on the ground? When were you informed of it? What's your understanding of what he did during his time in Liberia? And was his second visit, somehow it was said it wasn't as part of the UN. How was this made clear to Liberians? Thanks.
Thank you, Matthew. It was upon our own initiative from here. Myself and Ambassador Ibn Chambers, who is the SRSG in West Africa and the Sahel, we consulted with each other, and based on the fact that Mr. Obasanjo has a certain degree of gravitas amongst the Liberian politicians, we thought that his presence and advice to certain Liberian actors would be useful in order to avoid another round of litigations following the announcement of the second round's results. And we were not petrified, but nonetheless we thought that taking undue risks and chances would not be prudent. For that reason, we proposed to the Secretary General to send Mr. Obasanjo, who, as you know, is a member of his high-level advisory group on mediation. And this was the first time that a member of this group has been deployed in order to send positive messages and try to contain intentions that would have dragged down the electoral process beyond reason. Constitution of Liberia required the inauguration of the new president to take place on the 22nd of January. If there had been another round of legal actions lodged by the losing party, then the likelihood of missing that timeline in the Constitution was very real. So we didn't want to take that chance, because that would have opened the potential for a constitutional or institutional crisis. And I think his presence here for 1.5 days was useful in the fact that he spoke to a range of political actors, and he managed to convince Mr. Boakai, the former vice president who was emerging as the loser, not to delay accepting his defeat. And he did reach out to the winner, Mr. George Weah, and conceded his defeat and accepted his success. I think in that sense, the presence of Mr. Obasanjo on behalf of the Secretary General as part of his high-level advisory, member of the high-level advisory group on mediation was quite useful.
Just one very fast follow-up. I just wanted, because it's come up here as well, and thanks for saying that. Obviously, you would know better that whether the gravitas that he has there. Since then, Mr. Obasanjo has called on President Buhari in Nigeria to not run again. I mean, I'm not saying that he has total freedom of speech, but I'm just wondering, is it in terms of going forward with the mediators, do you think, is it possible to separate political statements they make either in their own country or about third countries from the kind of gravitas and impartiality you're trying to bring in to where you're the SRSG?
You know, if I may, I think
that would be beyond my remit, Matthew. I shouldn't be talking about other countries, but let me just mention that he is not only a citizen of Nigeria, but also one of the former presidents, and I think he still carries a certain degree of influence within the polity of Nigeria, and if he speaks up his mind, it has nothing to do with his function as the Secretary General's member of the advisory group. I'm sorry, Stefan, you want to...
No, I was just going to add that, you know, obviously the Secretary General uses his members of advisory group as he sees fit, and I think we answered the question yesterday on Mr. Obasanjo's comments in Nigeria. George.
Thank you, Stefan. George Baumgarten, correspondent for Africa Connect Online and other occasional publications. I'm curious to know what is the state of election technology and automation there. I'm a New York City voter. I vote on a paper ballot where you fill in little bubbles and then shove it into the machine. How is this done in Liberia, which of course has an extreme salutary effect on the quality and trustworthiness of the results? And it would seem from your descriptions of lack of demonstrations that the result has the trust of the people. What is the state of the election technology there? Thank you very much.
I think it's at a level that lends total credibility to the process. Is there room for improvement? Certainly. The voters' registration cards, for instance, are still not biometrics. It was because of the late start of the election process and because of the lack of adequate funding. But they're now determined to go ahead and prepare themselves for the forthcoming senatorial elections in a couple of years and would start issuing biometric voters' cards. And then as for the ballots, these are printed abroad, not in domestic print houses, and these are monitored by not only a group of commissioners from the Elections Commission, but also representatives of political parties who wish to be present during the whole process of preparation of the formats and the drafts, and these would be screened and everybody would sign off on them, and then these would be sent to reputable places in Europe mostly for printing, and political party representatives are invited and encouraged to participate in monitoring the entire process, and these are delivered under seal and constantly kept under observation and protection of the police in the presence of party observers, and opened in their presence, in the presence of thousands of watchful eyes of external monitors and observers. I think having gone to that extent was meant for the purpose of closing the door to undo complaints about misuse of the election process in order to advantage a party or disadvantage a party.
Great. Farid, thank you very much. Thanks for taking the time out to talk to us, and best of luck and congratulations to you and your team. Take care.
Thank you. I have a couple of closing remarks.
Sure. Go ahead.
I had reserved it in
Excellent.
Liberia will not have a peacekeeping operation as of the end of March. But with the departure of UNMIL, the UN will not close shop here. There would be a significant presence of the United Nations agencies, funds, and programs who will continue to hold the hands of the Liberians while they work on rebuilding their country and strengthening their economic and democratic basis. It's very important also for the international community to know that the job is not accomplished with the closure of the peacekeeping mission. Liberia's fragility and vulnerability is still there. While they work on trying to improve things, it would be very, very important for the international community to maintain a robust engagement with Liberia. They will continue to require assistance and support, and it would be very bad if, with the advent of this new administration, some countries decide that the book is closed on Liberia and move on to other places. I'm saying this because there is a tendency that some donors may consider Liberia as less deserving of such solidarity and support. I would caution against any relapse in the absence of adequate engagement and support to Liberia. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you, Farid. Thank you for those remarks. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you.